Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome to The Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith, joined today by Andrew Jenks, filmmaker, documentarian, podcast host. Andrew, great to have you.
Thank you, DJ.
So, take me all the way back. I mean, you got started at a really young age making films. So, how did you first get interested in filmmaking, and who were some of the people early on that you really liked?
I was 19 years old. I was at NYU, and I had a grandfather who was kind of going through dementia, and I just was really craving to make a movie, and I didn't have the money to make a scripted film or anything like that, but as I saw him kind of falling apart, I was in this dorm with 300 freshmen, and he was in this nursing home with kind of 300 senior citizens, and I thought, it's kind of weird. We're both in sort of these buildings. I didn't have that many friends. He didn't know many people in this nursing home, and so I bought a camera off of eBay. I couldn't get into the nursing home that he was in because of different rules and HIPAA violations. Called 20 or 30 different nursing homes, found one in Florida, and ended up moving in for a summer into a assisted living facility in Florida, and didn't end up going back to NYU, edited the movie in my parents' basement, and then just like submitted it to film festivals very kind of randomly, and just trying to get into one. And then got into one, got into a few, and then to make a long story short, got lucky, man. Like HBO called and bought the film, and so that was kind of the start.
So when you were living in that assisted living facility, what was the craziest part of that experience?
Oof. I mean, I guess on the more serious side, it was interesting to see that whatever kind of capabilities that the senior citizens, my friends really, that were 70, 80 years old, whatever they still had, they would use to help other people. And that was really interesting, and not to be too cheesy, but inspiring. So like there was this one woman, Tammy, who couldn't see very well, hear very well, couldn't really walk, on her wheelchair all the time, but her mind was totally intact. And she would go from table to table during lunch, which was at like or dinner, which was like 4 o'clock.
Really early.
Yeah, like actually 4 o'clock. And she would tell sex jokes to each table.
Wow.
And just to like brighten the mood a little. And that was her kind of responsibility in life, was to just give some energy to that assisted living facility. There was another guy named Bill, 82 years old at the time. He was a Marine, and he was losing a lot of his memory, and couldn't remember people's names, but could sort of identify, and he would go every day. We would sneak out of the nursing home, go to the local dollar store, and what he did remember was which of his friends at the nursing home liked certain candies. He would buy candy, come back and say like, here's your Skittles, here's your Snickers, and it was his way of just trying to make people feel better. So that was interesting to see, that when they had nothing left, they would use whatever they could to help other people. And other than that, it's kind of, there's a lot of fun. Like there's a lot of downer moments, but there's, people are dating each other, and you forget, they're just, they're the same as us. They just happen to have more experience and have lived through the Great Depression and certain parts that like you can learn a lot from. So I lived in room 335, and that's what the movie's called, and yeah.
And it's certainly an interesting time for you because you were in college, looking to make friends, starting things fresh for you. These people are at the back end of their lives and still looking to make friends. And so when you think about your NYU time, obviously it was a small time for you, but what was the most important thing you learned at NYU?
I think the idea of I think the idea of this day and age, especially now, I was at NYU maybe 10 plus years ago, especially now, like if you think about the history of time, like we never, one who didn't have money, I was there on scholarship, you wouldn't be able to go and just make a movie. Like that required film, that required, expensive cameras. And now we have iPhones where you can film
push of a button.
Push of a button, man, and you can make. I've shot scenes that have been on national TV on iPhone, and no one's like, oh, what was? No, it's the same as it can be the same, I should say, as an expensive camera. So I think what I learned from that experience was, if you want to go make a movie and you really believe in your story, you have a good story, you find the right characters that you can empathize with, there's not a lot stopping you. I mean, there is, but there are things that you can overcome.
And one of the things that's never stopped you is age. It doesn't matter how old you were. Like, you were 21 years old. You make the Bobby V documentary.
Yeah.
I'm a long-suffering Mets fan.
Okay,
so
I was going to say, you've done your research. Wow, yeah.
When you think about that moment in your life and that character, you know, what is the most memorable part of that experience for you?
Yeah, so ESPN gave me the money to go make a movie about this American baseball manager, Bobby Valentine, who's quite the character. And he was the first American who had great success here in New York with the Mets, and goes to Japan, becomes the first American to ever win a Japan series, and in turn, as a result, became like a demigod. A beer named after him, a burger named after him, a street named after him, literally shrines in different parts of the country. Like, this guy was, Bobby was beloved. And it was interesting because what Bobby did was, when he went there, he made a point of really respecting the culture. So it wasn't like he went there and he said, I'm an American, this is how we do things. He didn't just adapt to their baseball culture, he also ate the food, learned the language, and I think that was also a big part of it. One of the things that I could remember, I mean, it was crazy because I was there for 8 months, traveled with the team, and so people will ask me, you know, what's Japan like? And I have such a slanted view in the best way, because I was traveling around the country with a group of rock stars, you know, and so it'd be like if someone were to come to America for 8 months and follow around, I don't know, Brad Pitt or Justin Bieber, you'd be like, it's freaking great. Everyone treats you really well, and you get the food's amazing, you know, so it's a tricky thing. We climbed Mount Fuji with Bobby. That's what he did on his like one-off day, and filmed it. And that was, it's one of those things where it's like a great memory, but just excruciating. And Bobby's maybe 60 or 70, but in much better shape than most of us.
I mean, that's just insane. And you'll always have that memory, too.
Always have the memory. Got the certificate up, like proof. So, yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, I mean, yeah, you could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah.
So when you think about somebody like Bobby V or some of the other people that you've profiled, done documentaries on, what do you look for in a person or a story? Because you kind of think about things differently. You come from a different perspective. What's your process in terms of finding a story, thinking about it differently, and creating a product that hasn't necessarily been done?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I don't know if there's not necessarily like, it's a formula. I think the big thing, what I love are people who tend to not want to be on camera and almost say to me at first, you know, I don't think, when I first approached Bobby V, he said, you know, straight up, I gave him this whole pitch with 2 other friends, and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. Why would I want to do that? Like, I'm a baseball coach. Right. I got to win. You guys are a distraction. So, and then I did another documentary for ESPN, a short on Shawn Bradley. Yeah, it's posterized. Yeah. And took me a year to get in touch with him.
Wow.
And that's because he was busy traveling to go see troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. He's a big family guy, and it was like, I don't need a profile done on me.
Especially that type of profile.
Yeah, profile about people dunking. And I, you know, in a world where a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong, I'm not trying to judge it, but in a world where a lot of people are, you know, applying to be on reality shows and everyone is looking for that kind of 15 minutes, it's interesting to meet people who have these layered stories that are complicated and aren't looking for attention. If you can find those little pockets, it sort of fascinates me. And then also that there's layers to that. So it's Bobby in Japan, this kind of, you know, big American personality that is fit into this country that is very about sort of, you know, keeping a low profile. And that's not Bobby, but he made it work. Or Shawn Bradley, this guy who is known as kind of one of the biggest failures in NBA history, But once you unpack really his story, you realize he made over $100 million. He's still with his family. He loves his life. He always made it clear basketball wasn't a priority. And so you realize the narrative that we've been told all along, you know, there's kind of other perspectives to that.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because, you know, whether it's the media, other people, certain perspectives are already shaped. And when you get in there and do the story, you get to tell it in a totally different way. Because when I think about Shawn Bradley, I think about one of the biggest players in NBA history, one of the biggest busts, but you wouldn't even know unless you do the legwork.
Yeah, and to your point, DJ, it's like the biggest bust to us.
Right.
Like, that's our perception of a bust.
The guy's making $100 million, so he's got a great life.
He's got a great life. Again, still like with his family. He's obsessed with his daughters and their volleyball teams.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and it's like, so who's, you know, who had the last laugh?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has his health as opposed to some of these NFL players, which are, you know, trying to do everything they can just for a few dollars. So, yeah, definitely an interesting guy to take a look at. When you think about your current project now, what really happened? You've done so many different documentaries, and we were talking off camera, like, you just focus on the content now. So how did this project first come about for you?
You know, I was talking to Brian Gewirtz and Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia, and The Rock is known as obviously a big, I mean, suffice to say, massive movie star and so much else. He's also a big documentary fan. And so I was talking to them about this one story in 1981 that I had read about where Muhammad Ali supposedly talked a guy out of committing suicide on the 9th floor of a building in Los Angeles. And I was reading about this story, and as a big sports fan, I started to see that certain parts of it didn't make sense. And I thought, wait, you know, this guy was up there, he claimed to be a Vietnam vet. Turns out he was 21 at the time, too young to be a Vietnam vet. Apparently Muhammad Ali got the phone call about this, and he showed up 4 minutes later, and his Rolls Royce just happened to be in Los Angeles 4 minutes away. If anyone's ever been in Los Angeles, you can't get anywhere in 4 minutes.
No way.
So I realized, and then I talked to LAPD, the police files were, the police files were missing from that day. And I am not a conspiracy theory guy, but just like the basic things you're looking for were missing.
Yeah.
And so either Ali kind of created this situation, and he did it, by the way, for incredibly admirable reasons, as it turns out, and or he talked a guy out of committing suicide. So either way, it's just like, it's classic Ali in the best way. I was telling them this story and thought of it as a documentary, and what you realize with Dwayne and his team is they're always thinking of ways to do it on a bigger scale. And so I thought of it as a documentary, and they said, well, what if, after a few conversations, well, what if this is one episode to a larger series that looks at history and provides another angle that people haven't necessarily taken the time to unravel? And then we started thinking, well, rather than it being a TV series, what if we made it a podcast, which are growing at this exponential rate?
No question.
And there's also an opportunity with podcasts to really hone in on story. So with documentaries, I spend so much time thinking about the visual and every shot and every frame and color correction, all these different things, which I look forward to doing again down the line. But these podcasts are sort of campfire stories. It's like my chance to tell you an awesome story, and if I do a good job, you're there until the very end, you're on this ride, and I'm hopefully telling you a story about something you know of. You know about Muhammad Ali, you know about Serena Williams, you know about Michael Jordan, Princess Diana, but maybe you haven't heard this take. And so that's the goal with every episode.
So season 2 officially drops today.
Yeah, season 2 out today. Yeah, man, thank you. Hopefully everyone likes it. We got lucky. I say selfishly lucky with the timing. I knew that the U.S. Open was going to be ending around this time, and I've always been interested in Serena Williams and her career. So I thought our first episode could be that, and knowing Serena, I thought she'll probably end up either winning or being in the finals. Didn't know what would happen. I've been researching her and her career for 8 months, so it wasn't like we kind of really timed it out in the way that it's all kind of came together. But she has a fascinating career that I think there's a lot of parts to it that people haven't really taking the time to get to know. And so that's what we do in the episode.
And Venus and Serena played each other in the U.S. Open as well this year.
You know, it's funny, you forget that part of it all. You're right.
Yeah.
Like, because of everything that's happened, I sort of overlooked that in a way. They played each other. And so the show is called What Really Happened. And what I specifically do in that episode is look at this time in 2001 at Indian Wells, where there was this big match when the two of them were playing each other. It was early on in their career. I think they were 19 and 21 respectively. And 4 minutes before the match were to start, Venus dropped out. And Richard Williams, their father, especially at this time, was this larger-than-life character and had all these amazing comments and, got in some controversy. And a lot of people started accusing him of essentially orchestrating this match and wanting Venus to drop out so that Serena could win. And this is like a big story that a lot of people talked about, and there was a lot of allegations about them cheating, or at least deciding who would win whenever Serena and Venus had to play each other. And so this episode takes a look at that and really takes a look at Serena's career and the surprising amount of, maybe it shouldn't be surprising, maybe that's me being naive, but just all of the different angles of constant racism and sexism she's faced. And one thing that I thought was funny with the U.S. Open that just happened, where she got, however you want to put it, she lost her cool or she got upset.
Penalized multiple times.
Penalized multiple times. It's funny when people were arguing like it's not a sexism thing. First of all, I think everyone was quick to have an opinion. And I think if you want to really know, like, you should listen to our episode, and it gives you context, because I think it's so easy to just say, well, this is my opinion. But one thing I will say is that it's funny, man, like, she gets upset and people are like, is that, she lost her cool, is that out of line? When Johnny Mack would lose his cool, he would get, he got endorsement deals.
Yeah.
I've been at plenty of NBA games where a player loses his cool, gets kicked out of the game, ejected, and there's a standing ovation. So it's hard for me to not see that there's a double standard there.
No question about it.
And also, just the last thing you can tell I get into it is that Serena Williams, her winning percentage, wins versus losses in her career, is something, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's somewhere in like 86%.
Wow.
Roger Federer is lower than that. I couldn't find another athlete. Tiger Woods is the highest in golf, actually, by far, in terms of winning percentage.
Right.
But you can't find another athlete in any sport, and obviously it's a bit apples and oranges, but that has as high of a winning percentage as she does. So just like, I think in some ways that's been kind of overlooked in all of this.
Yeah, she doesn't get the same love as other people in that greatest of all time in athlete terms, because of her winning percentage, her dominance, and like you look into what she's actually had to overcome, being a woman of color as well. Because
in tennis.
Yeah, in tennis, which is,
right.
You think about the history of that sport. So that's definitely an interesting one to check out. You look into Dave Chappelle's career a little bit, and he had a hit show, and then kind of faded away mysteriously. So what did you discover when looking into that?
So that one, which I'm starting to look into now, is interesting because he left the show and it was quickly coined as Dave Chappelle had a breakdown. And it's such a kind of cheap and sort of easy way to describe what happened. Like, you don't know that he had a breakdown. Like, there's people out there who have real breakdowns, so it's also an injustice to people who have mental health issues. He went to South Africa, so people all of a sudden assume, like, oh, if you went to South Africa, that's even more evidence of a breakdown. And then it's fascinating what he's done in the last few years, where he lives in this fairly small town in Ohio. He doesn't live in LA or New York or whatever. And there was an incident that happened 2 years ago on New Year's Eve. And there was a lot of controversy just in this local town about what happened. And And I'm watching this town hall, and where they're discussing what the town did wrong, what the police officers did wrong, and it's mostly, you know, middle-aged people that are, you know, I think it's a mostly white town, but
right,
I should double check that. And then all of a sudden, a guy, African-American dude with a leather jacket, walks up, and he's like, and he starts talking about what happened. You're like, that's Dave Chappelle. And no one in the town sort of went crazy or anything. He's just like a part of the community, and cares about the community. And I think in this day and age where everyone's tweeting, Instagramming, telling you what to do, how to get active, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just interesting to me that Dave Chappelle is spending real time in something like a local town hall where a lot of change is actually made. Yeah. And it's so easy to tweet something and you get 10,000 retweets and you feel good about yourself, but it's like this guy is actually kind of walking the walk, which I think is pretty cool and doesn't get the press that one gets when they have a breakdown and go to South Africa. So it's kind of telling that narrative that to me is much more interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool.
So in addition to those episodes, what else can people check out with season 2?
So I don't know if you remember, but there's been, and it came back in the news about a year ago, there was these sonic attacks against American embassy officials in Cuba. Mm-hmm. And I was like, there's sonic, this first broke in August 2017 by CBS Radio, actually. Steve Dorsey, and he broke the story, and he broke the story that there had been something that happened, and then other people started to say there were sonic attacks, and I thought and I looked into it, and I've talked to acoustic experts, ex-CIA, different officials involved in Cuba-American relations, Cuban ambassador, like you name it, and it's been a crazy ride of different points. I thought the Cubans did do it, then I thought the Russians did it, then I thought the Chinese did it, then I was convinced that America was behind it to try and get rid of the deal we've had.
And you said you're not a conspiracy guy.
And I'm not a conspiracy guy. Otherwise, I think I would have easily been like, this is what happened.
Right.
And then I was like, is it mass hysteria? So in the episode, I go through all of what happens, and in the end, I say like, well, I don't want to give it away, but I give my opinion, but I say, I do also say like factually, it would be, I don't know. Like, and there's some great reporters who are reporting on it who are actively really working on this to try and get to the bottom of it. So then I don't know if you remember Balloon Boy. This is another episode.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the kid who, 12-year-old, I think, who ends in this breaking news, and and they think he's in the balloon,
right,
and he's not. And it's an interesting kind of case study on just breaking news. And there's a lot about us just, for 2 hours, just being obsessed with what we've been told is a kid in a balloon.
Right.
And it's this like weird looking silver, like I don't even know if it's how to describe it yet. So we're doing an episode about what really happened there. Do you remember the movie John Carter?
Yes.
So, $250 million Disney movie, was supposed to be a tentpole movie. They had a trilogy planned, a theme park planned, and it ends up just bombing. And I was just fascinated at like, what's the anatomy of a box office flop? Like, how does that happen? It was directed by a 2-time Academy Award-winning filmmaker, Taylor Kitsch, who was a rising star from Friday Night Lights. It was Disney and all of that comes with that. So what starts to fall through the cracks to make something not work? And in the end, I think we're able to articulate that, but also discover that it may not have really been a box office flop. And there might be something to be said for there being a sequel or a TV adaptation of it. And it's funny when something's like coined a box office flop. If you really look at the economics behind it, the money behind it, if you look at worldwide box office.
Right.
It's not necessarily, you know, we quickly say box office flop after the first weekend that it's out.
And we're thinking about just America, or we're thinking about just this limited little thing that we're checking
Exactly. Out. North American sales over the course of 3 days. And so John Carter was 30 million opening weekend. That was the number that was out there. It had made, I think, 80 or 90 million that weekend internationally. And there was just a lot of rumors around the movie that were coming from competing studios that wanted to see Disney fail. And so, listen, the movie didn't do well. The movie isn't a classic film that I'm suggesting everyone should go watch. But I end up finding a much different, I thought it was just going to be, this is why it failed, and it would be an interesting story. But there turns out there's many more layers to it than I would have expected.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so thinking about your life for a sec, you know, we live in like a very transparent world today, whether it's stars talking about stuff they're going through, NBA players. You've talked about your own stuff with depression. So what's it been like to publicize that? And what's it been like for other people to share their stuff as you go through stuff?
So I, since I can remember, have had what I would call a melancholy, or what is best described as sort of chronic depression since I can remember. Probably came out most forcefully, so to speak, when I was 17, 18 maybe. And for years I was definitely ashamed of it, would never talk about it to anyone really, and just sort of lived with it. And by chronic depression, I'm talking crying for no reason. There wouldn't be a trigger point, hard time getting out of bed, that sort of thing, and just extreme loneliness. You get the point. And something that still happens to this day that I kind of every day is sort of like, I don't want to say a battle, but it's something that I am always, you know, managing. And when I had some success with an old MTV show that I was on, and I was in front of the camera, so I was a little bit more out there. I was invited to the White House to go and talk about it, and I wouldn't do it. I was just petrified. I think, you know, it's difficult for me to ever like say that as a white guy things are at all tough. Like,
sure, but everybody,
you know, I think that a male who cries still has a taboo. There's certain taboo to that. Yeah. And so I've, last like year or so, I've become more comfortable talking about that. And I think it's for two reasons. One, I notice that when I do talk about it, I get an outpouring of people on Twitter, Instagram saying, thank you, I'm petrified of talking about it myself. And so that alone is good reason to do it. And two, I think it's kind of interesting that we live in a world where people spend a lot of time working out, which is great, and also a lot of money belonging to gyms and that sort of thing. And then you say you go to therapy or something, and people are like, oh, therapy. And you're talking about maybe 1 hour a week to work on your mind. Yeah. And it's like, why would you not? It's almost, it's like, how is that taboo? Like, you're going to the gym 5 times a day to get like better legs or a better, like, God bless. I got nothing, like, listen, Dwayne Johnson is my boss. Like, I'm all for it.
You build those muscles, I'm going to work on this main muscle here.
Yeah, why, like, and I work out and I do all that stuff too, but why would you, it's like almost, if you kind of look back at it, it's like, why would you not be doing that, even if you're not struggling with depression? And it's not, it doesn't have to be a rich person's thing. You know, there's therapists that work on sliding scales and that sort of deal. So, yeah, that was kind of the part of the impetus behind talking about it more.
No, I think it's incredibly brave for you to talk about it, and I really appreciate that. And you know, somebody else that kind of talked about his struggles was Mac Miller, who we lost recently, and saw a picture of you guys together from a while back.
DJ does his research. Damn, this guy, that's impressive.
So, you know, what was your reaction to his passing, and you know, what was his impact on the music world, in your opinion? There's certain artists out there, I think, that are just usually artists that really kind of, you know, make it, so to speak, Mac Miller being one of them, where there's an authenticity to them, which is such an overused word these days, you know, it's authentic, but he was really the real deal. And I was working with 4 guys out of Oakland, lived in the hood, had a tough upbringing, and they were looking for, you know,
not their big break, but ways to sort of get more into the industry. And myself, along with a friend, reached out to Mac and said, you know, what do you think about these guys, they're dancers, dancing to one of your songs at one of your concerts? And he was like, awesome. And he didn't just, you know, he didn't just like kind of do it and the guys came up and he was like, great. You know, they came on for a whole song of his. He met up with them beforehand to work on it and wasn't looking for credit or wasn't doing it to, you know, be like, oh, Mac's the man. And you know, he had a quote where it's like, he's something very simple, but like, I'm always rooting for good people. He just through his actions, you could tell he was just someone that kind of fought for the underdog, and I really respect that. And you know, with a guy like him that was struggling, it's just a reminder that if you're friends with someone who's struggling, there's a lot of kind of hotlines out there that say, you know, if you're struggling, reach out to this hotline and get help, 100%. The biggest thing for people that I found, including myself when struggling, is it's very hard to pick up that phone and call a hotline. Call that person. You know, like some of the, and I probably can only remember a handful of times it's happened, but some of the biggest moments in my life when I was struggling is just when someone randomly calls me, and I'm not even necessarily that close with, and is like, yo, just so you know, if you're ever struggling, I wouldn't walk over to see you, I'd run over to see you. And so that was just a reminder of when he passed. I think he clearly had a lot of those friends and it still didn't work out. And so, yeah, it's just like, it's hard to get around that, not, you know, not striking a chord, and just a reminder of like ways in which we can try and not, you know, prevent that from happening.
Yeah, no question about it. Andrew, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, thank you.
What Really Happened, Season 2,
yes.
Check it out now.
Out now. Appreciate it.
Thanks
Thank
a lot.
you.
We'll see you next time here on The Sit Down.